We need more lights round here in the depth of the darkness. I see the face of my fear. We need more light. We need more light round here. We need more light round here.
We need more light about each other. For light brings understanding. Understanding brings love. Love brings patience. And patience brings unity. We need more light. The first time I heard that quote, I was sure that I would find it attributed to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Imagine my surprise to find that that quote comes from Malcolm X. But then again, we don't always know the stories. Malcolm X, born into a situation where his father was killed by racists violently. His mother was driven into mental illness by a society that took away her children and pressured her, forcing him to the streets. But he was always seeking light. Found himself on the streets in Boston, found himself in prison. And even there, he was open to knowledge and to the light of learning. And so when he found himself released from prison, embarked on a journey that landed him eventually on a journey to Mecca. And there he saw Muslims coming from all around the world, and they were different colors, and they were different ethnic backgrounds, and from different nations. They were gathered there seeking light, and he came back to the United States, realizing that much of what he had preached before was not what it was about. He found Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He apologized for many of the things he'd said to and about him. The two of them pledged themselves to work together, and of course, both of them were taken. But the light that they each give to us, even in this time of division, creates an opportunity. I first saw the light in Greg Greenway when he was performing at a conference in Cleveland, and I was sitting in the audience listening. I was sitting there because he had gotten a showcase in front of the entire conference, and I had not. And I had a little less light. Until he began to perform. Because it transcended everything. I could recognize that it was a good choice to put him on that stage. And I remembered that when years later, we found ourselves doing a Phil Oakes song night, Songs of Phil Oakes, sponsored by his sister Sunny in New York City at the Village Gate. And we found each other in the back room while we were all waiting to go on. And he and I struck up a conversation. Former basketball players at that time, we were still basketball players. And we talked about sports, and then we talked about music, and then, strangely, somehow we got on the subject of race. This was not a usual thing for me to find a white musician, especially in the folk community, believe it or not, who was not only willing to talk about race, but was willing to talk about it to an audience who had already done a lot of reading and a lot of living. His story told me that he was living in much the same way that I was, realizing that race in America has been a problem since before America was America, and he was willing to represent. He wasn't always right, and we had conversations that were hard, but he was always willing. And then I started seeing that in his career, as he traveled around the United States and over to Europe, he was writing songs and bringing up the dangerous topic of race to audiences that I was sure didn't want to hear it, because Lord knows they didn't want to hear it from me. But I told him one day, they maybe can hear it from you because they see me coming. he didn't hang my encouragement to keep talking about it. And we began to form a friendship that has weathered the hard times and the difficult times in our nation. We opened our hearts to each other. We heard each other's hearts. And this is really what is necessary in America. Some of you are on this journey already. Some of you are considering deepening your journey. Wherever you are, you have an important part to play as we open conversations with each other and open our hearts to windows of love and unity. We need more light about each other. It's the only way that all of us will get through. We sit alone together, each from our different worlds, suspicious of each other, position flags unfurled. So much lies broken between us, lines of connection down, standing in ruins of pain and mistrust, searching for common ground. So we stumble through our points of view, logic falls apart. We see a place to start through the windows of heart. We sit in silence and wonder, where do we go from here? Frustration dragging us under, no resolution clear. We feel the anger, this desperation to turn this world around. Each of our faces a mirror, searching for common ground. So we lower our defenses, watch them fall apart. In that moment of confusion, we see a place through
that moment of communion, the secret place to start through the windows of
Well, from my side of the coin, just so you know, I didn't get any gigs from that show either. So they didn't like me either. The people who got thousands of gigs were the ones who went, a long, long time ago, I can still remember. You know, if you did American Pie or something like that. they
Billy
call it-
Joel impersonation.
Yeah, exactly. Then you got work everywhere. So we both came out of that
Yeah.
with the same scar. Yes, exactly. The counterpoint to what Reg said, and the nice things and the things that make me feel wonderful about my life, from the standpoint of our friendship, is the counterpoint to that is that what you see in front of you is a man with a huge heart. And to go through the experiences that he's gone through in his life, and be open. You know, for us to be friends and for me to say things that are culturally insensitive, you know, not understanding that they're culturally insensitive, and I get the, you know, you know, and he'll say, oh, it's cultural, you know, and that I hate that. But it's, you know, how do you know unless you have somebody who cares enough about the relationship that I can be wrong, I can make my mistakes, I can have my eyes open, I can be, you know, educated because I can make, any one of us can make an intellectual journey, but you need help to see the other side, to see the world from totally different eyes. And when you have someone who is as amazingly refined and open and with a heart the size of Reggie's, you know, this is what allows this to happen. It's an amazing accomplishment, amazing. We have been through so many things together, and talking about how we became friends. Well, how does anyone become friends? On some level, we just started talking. Well, first of all, Reggie has 1 million friends. Reggie, I'm telling you, you can find Reggie in any building by his laugh. People know him. It's like, oh, there's Reg. You know, I can find you anywhere. And the other thing we shared in common was, you know, we were people persons, and whenever we played a show, we did those Phil Oaks nights. You know, Sunny was, as soon as the lights went off, she's out the door, right? We are talking to the janitor as they put the locks on the door. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so the things that make people friends have made us friends, but what deepens that is that we have an avenue between us to talk about this most amazingly difficult topic that never gets talked about. Never gets talked about. And so this hearing of each other's hearts is such a metaphor, it needs to be extrapolated out. This is what we need to do. Hear each other's hearts. It is so very complicated. At a certain point, we realized we're going to be able to formalize this. You know, we were both been in different configurations musically, and we decided, you know, we need to do this. We've been talking about it forever, but the time came where we could make it come true. So we decided to take a kind of a pilgrimage together. So we went to New Orleans. It was a 23-hour drive, and the idea was we would talk this over, like how we could present this. Because, you know, there's a lot of people out there doing fabulous work who are psychologists, who are, you know, or therapists, who are whatever. We are storytellers and singers. And so we had to decide what we were going to do, and that's tell our story. That's our truth, and to encourage you to tell yours. And Reg will talk about that. But what we did is we went on a 23-hour drive down to New Orleans to take a program called Undoing Racism by an organization called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. Yeah, 3-day workshop. We also
23 hours down there, we had to check our own survival and beyond. But
that's right, exactly. And we also gave the prototype for this at the UU Church in New Orleans. I knew the minister there through a strange. She had said my name on. Well, she said my group's name on talking to Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. That's how I knew she existed. And so we went down there for that, and then we also went down to visit the Whitney Plantation and Slavery Museum. Perhaps you have heard of this. A guy named John Cummings from New Orleans bought the plantation, the land of the plantation, and has tried to restore it back to its original state in circa 1880, and with nothing, not the Walt Disney version, portray slavery exactly for the institution it was. So you have to drive about 15 miles west of New Orleans, because if you've ever seen a map down there, I did not understand this, but the coast, about, 150 miles of coast there, west of New Orleans, is just divided up into sugarcane plantations. And I had never seen sugarcane myself. So we went there, and we've been in a lot of places together. We've been to, and Reggie has seen some of the most incredible places. He's seen some places I have not, by being the leader, musical director of the Living Legacy Project that takes tours of people through the civil rights places in the South. We've been to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, the Lorraine Motel where Dr. King was assassinated. And that place, you can walk through a bus from Montgomery bus line, and on that, sitting in the seat where Rosa Parks sat, is a statue of Rosa Parks. It is a visceral experience. We stood at Jamestown together, where they were digging the first foundation of the first African slave there, one of 3 actually, named Angela. And our friends who put on our concert there were volunteering at the dig, and they took us there as they were digging that site up. Just after we left, they found an 8,000-year-old arrowhead, and then she found an African shell, the only African shell from a necklace that's been found in the New World. So this is visceral. This tells you these are people, human beings. This is not a page in a history book. So when we went to that plantation, I sort of expected that same visceral nature. When you get there, it's what a plantation is. It's a bunch of fields. And I had never seen a sugarcane plant, and it just looks like it would grow by the side of the road anyway. So, and it was a beautiful day in October. The sun was shining, it was 80 degrees, the wind was blowing, and they tried as best they could to tell us about what life was like in 1850, when 250 slaves were on that plantation. They could show us a few things, and they had done a lot of research, and they had all the names on pillars of all of the people who had been enslaved on that property, their names and where they were from, which is a considerable amount of academic work. But there just wasn't a lot of there, not like the Lorraine Motel. It's shocking to look at it. It's a field. The house is not Tara, it's just a kind of average house. The woman who ran that plantation in 1850 was sort of an outcast from New Orleans society. So the place was nothing extravagant, nothing crazy. And as I said, her guide tried her best to tell us, but showing and telling is 2 different things. So we were just kind of let down a little bit. And at the end of the tour, they said, you can go back to anywhere on this tour that you wish before the next tour comes through. So something made us go back to a church. That was the first building they took us into. And they brought the whole group of 30 people in there, and they brought out a television set, and, suddenly we were in the 21st century, But as we went in just by ourselves, we felt this thing that we had been missing. This church was placed there from somewhere else. It was built by freed blacks, obviously after emancipation. Brought there, that church was built so that black people could have burials. Slaves often did not have burials. And so it was called the Antioch Church, and it was derived from anti-yoke, as in free. And this time when we walked into it, we really felt what was around us a fantastic piece of art. 40 pieces of art. An artist named Woodrow Nash was commissioned to do life-size statues of all of the children that were present on the plantation at the time of emancipation. Each of those children were interviewed as adults, and their interviews about what life was like before emancipation is in the Smithsonian. Each of those statues, the human gestures that he captured in them was phenomenal. So when you walked in, your eyes are led to the center of the church. In the periphery, you feel that the people are here. And this, to me, this was where the souls of the past were. And each one of those children, their faces were somewhat abstracted, but their bodies were just absolutely captured beautifully. They were standing in postures, or sitting in postures, of sort of like waiting to hear from you. Literally 1 foot forward, like this. The standing ones. And then, like all kids, one would be like this and the other would be slightly behind, a little bit more leading, So it was just this incredible experience. The ones sitting on the floor, like kids in the school, would be sitting on the floor, leaning forward with their heads slightly tilted, waiting to hear from you. And we're like, what are they wanting to hear from us? And then it became clear. These were children on a plantation about to be emancipated. They wanted to know what it was going to be like to be free. And here we are for however many generations into the future. We knew what life was going to be like for them. How can you look into the face of a child knowing what their future is going to be like? That they won't know what freedom truly is, that their children's children won't, etc., etc., etc. And we sat with that for quite some time. What that engendered, I can speak for myself on this only, but what that engendered for me was a tremendous anger. So I can only imagine. What will our children say about us and what we did? It just made me want to do everything I could do. And this is why we're standing here this afternoon with you. Because this is what it takes. We heard their hearts from 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 160 years ago, whatever the heck it is. That was an English lit major. We could feel their hearts. How could we give them hope? The thought that arose in me was to say to them, what you carry inside of you will one day read a magnificent poem on the steps of the Capitol to the most powerful man in the world. What you carry inside of you will one day be the most powerful man in the world. You won't see it. We're not going to see it fixed. We're not going to even see it fair. But somebody had to take one step at a time. One step at a time. And there, as we can tell now, there are a lot of steps remaining. When we looked at those children and we looked from where we are in history, my thought was, it's a mighty long way from there to here. It's a mighty long way from over yonder. It's a mighty long way from there to here. We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. As our works It's a mighty long way,
It's a mighty long way
from over yonder,
from over yonder.
it's a mighty long way
It's a mighty long way
from there to here.
there to here.
We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. Let's try it. It's a mighty long way
It's a mighty long way
from over yonder.
from over yonder.
It's a mighty long way
It's a mighty long way
from there to here.
there to here.
We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. Every child born is a revolution, is a revolution with a song inside. Some won't hear it, oh, some hear nothing else. They'll sing night and day just to keep that song alive. Oh, it's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long
way
from over yonder.
over yonder.
It's a mighty long way
It's a mighty long way
there to here. We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. Now when you got a dream, you got to stand up and shout it loud and clear. What's that I'm hearing? It's the voice of the people singing that we will make that walk from there to here. Oh, it's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long way over yonder, over yonder. It's a mighty long way, mighty long way there to here. We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. So that we can make that walk from there to here. So that we can make that walk from there to here.
Mighty long way. Thank you. We're going to make it just one step at a time. So many in our nation at this point are confused, angry, divided, upset, disappointed. The stories are legion, and as we continue, or as we begin to have these conversations, and thank you to some of you who came up at intermission and shared some of your stories. I know that you have stories because we are in the circle. There is so much experience in this room, and yet our experiences are so very different living in America. So we knew that in doing this program, we could not just come out to perform every night and not hear back something. Obviously, we can't spend the entire night here. But we encourage our audiences wherever we go, whether we're here in Connecticut or in Alabama or Mississippi or Michigan, wherever we are, we encourage our audiences to not make this a one-off. We encourage our audiences to find someone, either someone who's here or someone in your life that you can talk about the experience of being here. What did it trigger for you? What has it brought up for you? Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you so much for Eric.
Thanks to Ed.